One of the earliest surviving laws against official misconduct was carved in Babylon nearly 3,800 years ago. In 2026, corruption remains one of the world's most persistent obstacles to development. That gap is the story. Babylon. The law existed, accountability did not. Around 1750 BC, Hammurabi, king of Babylon, had 282 laws carved onto a 7-foot black stone stele. The purpose was clear: make the law public, create consistent rules, and define consequences for misconduct. Some provisions addressed behavior we would now associate with corruption. Judges who changed their decisions could be fined and permanently removed from office. Commercial fraud and abuses of authority also carried specific penalties. For its time, this was remarkably sophisticated. Visible law, defined punishment, and removal from office. But written penalties did not eliminate corrupt behavior. The deeper problem was structural. Hammurabi's laws punished misconduct after it occurred, but they did not change the incentives or social relationships that made corruption useful. The code also treated people differently according to social rank. Babylon was not an equal society governed by neutral institutions. Judges, officials, merchants, and elites belonged to overlapping networks of wealth and power. The people enforcing the law were often socially connected to the people being regulated. The law existed. Independent accountability did not. Egypt. Fear worked until the ruler disappeared. Egypt tried a different strategy: extreme punishment. Around 1300 BC, Pharaoh Horemheb issued what is now called the Great Edict. It targeted extortion, theft by officials, judicial abuse, and the seizure of property from ordinary Egyptians. Some offenses carried brutal punishments, including mutilation and exile. Horemheb also sent royal officials to inspect provincial administration and attempted to restore discipline after years of political disruption. The system appears to have strengthened order during his reign. But its effectiveness depended heavily on Horemheb himself. He was the source of authority, the political will behind enforcement, and the figure officials feared. When he died without an heir, the decree remained carved on temple walls. But his personal enforcement network did not survive in the same form. Later, Egyptian records again describe officials stealing taxes, misusing state property, and manipulating legal decisions. Severity created obedience when power was present. It did not create an institution capable of sustaining accountability when that power disappeared. Horemheb changed officials. He did not permanently change the system. Rome. The watchdogs became part of the network. Rome built a more complex solution. The Republic had censors who reviewed public conduct and status, quaestors who managed state finances, tribunes with veto powers, courts that could prosecute magistrates, and a Senate intended to restrain executive authority. It also passed repeated laws against electoral bribery and abuse of office. But the repetition of those laws reveals the problem. Each new measure was introduced because earlier ones had failed. In the late Republic, electoral bribery became so common that it functioned almost like a normal campaign expense. Candidates offered money, banquets, entertainment, and favors to win public support. Judicial corruption was equally serious. In 61 BC, Publius Clodius Pulcher was acquitted despite evidence that Cicero considered overwhelming. Cicero alleged that the jurors had been bribed. A decade earlier, Cicero had prosecuted Verres, the former governor of Sicily, for years of extortion and theft. The evidence was so extensive that Verres fled into exile before the trial was completed. But most corruption cases never produced evidence, public attention, or political pressure on that scale. Rome had oversight institutions. The problem was who controlled them. Censors, senators, governors, judges, and prosecutors were largely drawn from the same elite class. They competed with one another, formed alliances, exchanged favors, and used prosecutions against political enemies. When corruption becomes a condition of political participation rather than a violation of the system, anti-corruption law becomes selective. It punishes opponents while protecting allies. Why the three systems failed. Babylon, Egypt, and Rome used different strategies. Babylon published laws and defined penalties. Egypt relied on fear and direct royal enforcement. Rome created multiple institutions to monitor public power. All three eventually faced the same structural problem. The people who benefited most from corruption also influenced the institutions responsible for controlling it. Babylonian judges applied the law within their own social class. Horemheb temporarily overrode corrupt networks through personal authority, but the system weakened after his death. Roman oversight bodies were staffed by members of the same aristocratic networks they were expected to supervise. The failure was not simply a lack of law. It was the absence of enforcement that was independent, sustainable, and protected from political capture. What actually changes a corrupt system? This does not mean corruption is permanent. Societies now considered relatively clean were not always that way. Parts of Scandinavia, North America, and Asia experienced serious patronage, bribery, and administrative corruption in earlier periods. They changed because corruption became more difficult, more visible, and less rewarding. Singapore's reforms from the 1960s onward combined several elements that ancient systems never maintained at the same time. Strong investigative authority, professional public administration, competitive and reliable government salaries, credible punishment, transparent procedures, public access to information, political commitment that continued beyond individual cases. Hong Kong later developed a related model built around enforcement, prevention, and public education. High salaries alone do not stop corruption. Severe punishment alone does not stop it. Independent agencies alone can also be captured. Durable reform requires these mechanisms to reinforce one another. Officials must believe that corruption is likely to be detected, that the consequences are real, and that honest service offers greater long-term security than misconduct. Citizens, journalists, courts, and civil society must also be able to expose abuse outside the internal hierarchy of government. The central lesson. Hammurabi made the law visible, but did not change who applied it. Horemheb frightened officials, but created a system dependent on one ruler. Rome built oversight institutions, but filled them with members of the same political class they were supposed to monitor. The law itself is not the mechanism. The mechanism is who enforces it, how independent they are, what incentives they face, and whether the public can see what they are doing. Conclusion. Nearly 3,800 years of anti-corruption law have produced the same lesson. Written rules matter, but they are never enough. Corruption survives when enforcement depends on the same networks that benefit from breaking the rules. It declines when oversight is independent, misconduct is visible, honest officials are protected, and punishment is credible regardless of status. The ancient world did not fail because no one understood that corruption was dangerous. It failed because its institutions could rarely hold powerful people accountable without depending on other powerful people. Which ancient system came closest to solving the problem? Babylon's public law, Egypt's severe enforcement, or Rome's institutional oversight?